Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next AmiSights Podcast. I am your host today, Lynn Ozer with Multifunding, and I have the privilege of sharing this podcast with Keith Roberts. Keith is a Bodhisattva. Keith, before we go any further, you need to tell us what a Bodhisattva is.
I will definitely share it with you, and it is my goal in this life. I wouldn't say I've reached that yet, but I'm a Buddhist. I found Buddhism about 30 years ago, and a Bodhisattva is a Buddhist whose purpose in this life, in this incarnation, is to help others reach their nirvana or their enlightenment. So it really aligns with much more with what I do today than the 2 decades I spent, building websites for airlines and bands and things like that.
Really, it's a little bit different, but
Yeah.
let's walk that path and go over that bridge that took you to where you are today, because being enlightened is something that all of us should aspire to. If we don't, at least I do at this stage in my life. And so let's see, let's start back to when you were in college and what you wanted to do with your life when you realized you had to go out and support yourself.
So I had the incredible privilege of attending what I would humbly say is the most magical school in the world. It's a place called Brooks Institute of Photography. It actually doesn't exist anymore, but it was in Santa Barbara, California, which I think is heaven on
I
earth.
actually know someone who went there.
No
How
way,
about that?
really? What
Yeah.
what years? Do you remember?
Uh,
I was 92 to 95. So
oh
when you
God,
talk
no.
to them next, yeah. But
God, no. Way before you.
oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
You made me feel young, which is hard to do.
You
Uh,
are very young. I don't even want to
um,
talk about it.
yeah, but I went to Brooks in the 90s, and I was a devout atheist at the time. Really believed, we evolved. The whole Bible thing is a fun made up story that gives people maybe some interesting perspective and parameters on how to live their life. But I've always felt like even if I was born on a desert island, I would know right from wrong. I don't need the um, the fear of or the threat of burning in eternity to know that I shouldn't steal from my neighbor or covet thy neighbor's wife or all of these things. It's just, are you a good person? So I was a devout atheist, and then I first 2 semesters at Brooks, there was a gentleman, his name was Lap Song, and he was auditing several colleges around the United States. He worked directly with the Dalai Lama, and he introduced me to the concept of Buddhism and planted that seed. And it's really flourished over the last 30 years. And that's been the shift in my life. And I left Brooks thinking, all I've ever wanted to do is be a photographer. I spent several years assisting some of the best photographers in the world, had an amazing time, but then had to make that leap of, am I going to be an assistant forever? Or am I going to be a photographer? Spent a year as a starving artist. And, really right when I graduated, and it's changed so much over the 30 years, but it was the start of that industry really dying. Studios, you no longer needed to hire a photographer, 2 models, a location scout, craft services to get a picture of 2 people shaking hands in a boardroom. You could go to Getty and for a few $1,000s purchase that image. And, fast forward 30 years, the people don't even have to exist. You can use AI to just create it. And so it's been interesting to see how creative services have evolved. But I never wanted to do anything other than photography. And it was only out of poverty and demand and hey, I've got to feed myself that I started web design.
Yeah.
And back then it was the Wild West. When I started Zen Man, and the agency was called Zen Man because back in the day I was just this Buddhist kid, cranking out websites under the stairs in my living room. And then we sort of grew over the years, but it really was the Wild West, and very guerrilla in the way that I approached growing that business. I would randomly, if I was driving down the street and saw an apartment development or a loft, I would call the phone number and say, hey, I'm, visiting from New York. I want to look at your website. I noticed you didn't have one on your banner. Oh, no, don't. Let me email you something. And I'd be like, nah, don't worry about it. I'll check back later. And I would do that a few times. And then, a few weeks later, I would call back as the web guy and, pitch it. So it was really,
What a great marketing scheme.
it's really a guerrilla approach. And then that just evolved. We did exceptional creative work. Perpetual karma was one of our core values. So quantitative creativity, which most agencies don't have. Any work that we did for you, the number at the end of the project should have a dollar sign in front of it, and you should be able to measure the success of the work that we did. And so that was really, unheard of in the agency world, to quantify the work that we're doing. One of our other values was perpetual karma. So we applied the same approach that I did in my personal life to business. We gave a ton of stuff away, but we always did the right thing. And then our other core values were process gurus, also pretty unheard of in the agency world. We were very process driven. And then quantitative creativity, reputation guardians. So 20 years in the industry, we had a 5-star reputation on everywhere you could review us. And that was because even when we didn't screw up, if somebody was unhappy, we guarded our reputation savagely, because that took decades to build, and it could take one email or one phone call to destroy. So that was really what we built the agency on. And then I feel very fortunate that after a few years, it shifted to the point where now we just had to answer the phone. We didn't have to do fictitious phone calls to try to generate demand for a website.
That's terrific. That's a great story. So web design is, artistic in nature. And so I can understand that if you had to make money and you couldn't just take pictures, this was good. This was good. So you have some pretty reputable and large companies in your portfolio. How did you get them? How did you have a marketing team at that point, or how did
No.
you grow the business?
I did have, over the years, I had multiple people that worked in sales for me. Really the best person I ever had was a man named Randall Hartman, and he's got his own agency. In fact, he just qualified for EO this last class, and he joined EO Colorado. I'm incredibly proud of what Randall has built in a much shorter time than it took me. But for us, it was building the reputation. When we did Frontier's website, Frontier called us. When we did, Remax, that they were calling us. So we worked hard enough to get to the point where we were sought after, and we were definitely, not by any means the cheapest. We had a reputation for you paid for quality, but it was exceptional. So yeah, the truth of the matter is they called us because of the work that we did and because of our reputation. And I feel really, really fortunate for having built that reputation. And then, fast forward 20 something years, that's the reason that we were acquired. The merger was not, company that purchased Zenman didn't do any of the services that we offered. They were a SaaS company that did marketing automation. But what interested them about Zenman was our reputation in the marketplace. And so it was an interesting win-win merger that had nothing to do with, hey, we just want to buy your client list. They really just wanted to buy our reputation.
So how many employees did you have at the time of the sale?
I had actually been sort of dimming the light. So at our heyday, we were probably around 28, 29 employees. And I had this epiphany. Well, you're EO, so the Entrepreneur Masters program at MIT. Year one of that, I had this just realization that I was trading my time for money. And even though, my hourly rate was that of a really high paid attorney, it was still a bad deal, right? It was still trading the one finite resource I have, my time, for money. And I left MIT that year and created the tool called the Oak Journal. I've given Ami one, I'll definitely send you one, but it's a 90-day structured journal based on positive psychology and neuroscience. And the goal was, hey, I want to create some things that make money while I sleep. And then it completely backfired in the best way, in that I fell into public speaking. So I never sought out to be a speaker, but I kept getting requests from organizations, EO, YPO chapters. Hey, can we get the cat that created this to tell us of the story? And then that's evolved into really aligning with my life's purpose, again, to be a Bodhisattva. If I can speak to 500 people and even touch one of them in a way that changes the trajectory of their life, then that's my reason for being.
So you sold the company. And were you the 100% owner of Zen Man when you sold it? Okay.
Yeah.
So when you sold it, did they want you, or they just wanted the rep and your people? Did the people keep their jobs? Is that what was so
Yeah.
attractive about it?
A few things that were attractive about it. One, it was a win-win. They did keep me for a year, and I stayed a year and a half because the company that purchased us is another EOer, Danny
Oh,
Solon from EO Argentina, and his company is called In Blue. And so, one, just the culture at the company was so good. I didn't have this, I can't wait until my earnout's over and I can just like peace out.
right.
I stayed, almost a little over half a year longer than was required to just try to help. There was definitely some, the timing with COVID and all of these different shifts. It was a challenging time to accomplish the goals.
What year did you sell?
2020.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
In the midst of COVID or right before?
Right. I mean, we were in the deal negotiations. We were finalizing our merger agreement before the world shut down.
Oh
Uh,
my.
it happened actually. I remember the funds came in because I logged it on my phone right after I got my first vaccine. So I was driving back from the vaccine, and I was actually in tears, just feeling like, oh my god, I've been in my house for what, 9 months, a year. I have asthma, and I took it very seriously, so I really locked
Yeah,
down.
right.
And so I had this tears of like, oh my god, there's some sort of normalcy again. I'm going to get to interact with humans. Um, and then I also logged in. I remember like opening my checking account and going, it happened. Like the money's there. It's actually a deal because as you know, until you see it in your account, it just doesn't feel real.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, um, were there any issues because of the timing or because all of you were there? I mean, it seems to me that companies needed web presence more than ever during COVID when there was no like any type of physical contact at all. And people were definitely more into technology than they were before.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really, really good observation. And the interesting thing is we immediately stopped doing websites. So when we were acquired, the company that bought us only did marketing automation. They didn't have the developers, the designers, the tools in place to keep doing that. So, over the decades, we developed a pretty robust referral network. Randall's a great example at Groundwork. He's when somebody wanted Zen Man caliber work, that's where I would send them. And then everything in between, there's a great company, Initial Capacity. It's a friend that does software development. So I had the network to send people. But actually, I think one of the things that in retrospect we didn't do correctly was, when somebody came to us and they needed everything. Hey, you're going to do our brand refresh. You're going to create a new website. We want the marketing strategy. And then what tools should we be using to execute on the strategy that you recommend? As opposed to, hey, we don't do any of that other stuff anymore. But for email and SMS, we're your guy. And I think that was not the right approach in retrospect because I hate the term one stop shop, but people want a solution where, hey, I've got one, maybe a better term is one neck to choke if my campaigns are not working. And when you have multiple agencies, and we experience this over the year, well, the website's not converting. Well, you're driving, poor traffic to the website and you don't have one single source of accountability. And that was a big part for me in, hey, well, if we're recommending another shop and they are a HubSpot, platinum provider, they're going to refer a different tool to us. And it took us a few months to, oh, wow, we need to be sort of offering everything and doing it under one roof. And then we could make those connections. But ultimately, successful in me. And then I got to transition into the next, I don't want to say chapter, but almost next book in the series of my life. And for In Blue, it really helped pave their expansion into the US. They crush it in Latam. They're really, really big in Latin America. But it was a challenge, and I think language is a barrier as well. If you've got somebody from Argentina calling on somebody, in the US, it doesn't feel like it feels outsourced versus onshore. And so that was one of the other things that we were able to help them with.
That's terrific. And I'm sure it felt good to you that these people still had employment. That sounds
Absolutely.
like really important. So you sell your company And now, are you sitting there going, okay, what am I going to do? Or you just felt that the next thing you were going to do was pass this knowledge along to other entrepreneurs? Or how did that go?
A little more windy than that, and
Okay,
kind of
good.
interesting
Tell us.
story. My ex's Reiki massage therapist had a nightmare that I drowned, and her name is Celeste, and she reached out to Mindy, my ex, and said, "Hey, can you share Keith's contact info for me? I had this dream, and I really need to share it with him." So I went and had a session with Celeste, and it was right before the first speaking tour I ever did. I got invited to do 5 countries, several chapters, YPO and EO around Asia. And she said, I see if you cling to this life that you've been living, this agency life, I think you're going to die soon. But if you embrace this opportunity, I just have this feeling that it's a whole new second life for you, and will be fulfilling and enriched, and your path that I see. So when I went on that trip, I just said yes to everything. Anybody that I spoke to that, will you come to my house for dinner tomorrow night? Can I take you to this? Let's go. I even said yes to durian, which is the most disgusting thing I've ever eaten in my life. It's that from Malaysia.
I don't even know what it is, but
Just know to say no. If anybody ever asks you to
okay.
eat durian, it is
Noted.
days you can't get that taste out of your mouth. But I embraced everything, and then came back and was like, oh my God, I made these amazing connections. One of my favorite things in the world, one of my values, core values, is it's adventure, leadership, fatherhood, creativity, and laughter. Those are my 5 core values. And if I can do leadership and I can do adventure and I actually get paid to go to these amazing places around the world, like, oh my God, what a gift.
Right.
And so I
What a
jumped in with
gift.
2 feet, and then COVID shut the world down. So all of my in-person speaking gone. And so I took the next 18 months, and any event that I could do, paid or unpaid, virtually, even if it was just, Ami's forum was having a forum meeting, and, he got them all oak journals and wanted me to do my keynote. There were days where I did 3 or 4, Zoom keynotes a day. And on the backside, I built up a much more robust reputation as a speaker. And then it just sort of has continued to build momentum. But there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel like the luckiest guy in the world.
That's great. So tell us a little bit about, what you're speaking. If I said to you, I'm having a conference of 1,000 bankers and we need a keynote speaker, what do you do?
The main keynote I give is called Level Up Your Life. So no matter what you do, if you're a banker, if you're a plumber, an electrician, an entrepreneur, or a CEO, everybody wants to be happier and reach their full potential.
Of
And so
course.
the keynote helps you identify your ikigai, which is one of my favorite Japanese words. It translates to life's purpose or reason for being. And once you have that purpose, then create in the workshop together a roadmap to help everybody reach that potential. And then I leave them with tools that serve as a compass to keep them on their path, because it's very easy to get off your path and get distracted, to self-sabotage, to fall back into old behaviors. So leveling up. And it was originally really for, EO, YPO,
Right.
CEOs, but I've spoken at, wild bird feeder things, or basement health, guys that do like poisonous mold remediation. And lo and behold, everybody wants to be happier. Everybody wants to reach their full potential. Everybody wants to have the tools in their toolbox to be their best self. And so I've really been shocked with the different audiences that I have the honor to speak in front of and how diverse they are. But I think one of the benefits for companies, not for associations, is it's a very balanced talk. So, when we set that path, there's only a small portion of it that it's career driven, and then it's personal, and then relationship and community. And kind of like unlimited PTO, right? That's a nice perk that attracts people, but we all know the business benefits from unlimited PTO because they take less time off. You don't have to pay them out at the end of the year. The same thing with this keynote, right? Oh my gosh, the organization actually cares about me and my relationship with my partner and my kids. And my community, and me personally, how is my physical and mental health, and the tools to do it. And of course, if you're happier at home, if you're, performing better as a person, you're going to perform better at work. So it's absolutely, sort of all ships rise with the tide,
Yes.
with that talk. And there's a couple others. There's one more. I just finished a book with a friend, Ryan Avery, is another amazing keynote speaker. That's a historical fiction about a woman that lived 700 years ago in Tibet. Her name is Dawa. So that keynote is on leadership. The third one is on the science of happiness. So really getting into the neurochemistry, the neurotransmitters, what's happening in our bodies, in our brains that are impacting us, so we can have the routines, the behaviors, the tools to help, reduce our cortisol, increase our serotonin, our oxytocin, balance out our dopamine, and stop doing the things like scrolling through social media that are just crack. They're just, addiction. And that one's fun because it really gets into blending these ancient techniques with modern science that have studied them to actually show the medical benefits of meditation, for example.
So I am assuming that when you do these talks on serotonin and dopamine, you're not suggesting any of these drugs that are out there for everyone and anyone who I know that's on them, because of course everyone wants to feel better and be happy. But there's all those, Paxil, Prozac,
Oh
Effexor,
God, no.
Wellbutrin, all of those things. That's what you'd go and you say to someone, "Oh, I'm not so happy," and they immediately do that. They immediately give you drugs to help you do that. And obviously that's not what you're promoting.
No, not
So
at
this is an
all.
alternative, a
Yeah.
natural feeling happy.
So, I mean, meditation is the number one technique, I think, for the happiest, highest performing humans on the planet. But, breath work, it's amazing what you can accomplish with your own breath. A very, very close friend and is a speaker and facilitator, Finian Kelly, also an EO member, and he does guided breath work that can induce the same experiences as, a heroic dose of a psychedelic, and have that same transformation, be creating those new neural pathways in your brain,
Right.
just through your breath. Not opposed with intention to sacred plant medicines, very opposed to pharmaceuticals.
Right.
Um, yeah,
Right.
just
No, is it more difficult being self-employed and not being responsible for anyone else, because now you are everyone else and you have to do the business and everything all by yourself? Is that more difficult, or was it more difficult running a company with 28 people?
exponentially more difficult running a business with 28 people, 1,000 times. Really, I used to joke that life would be easier if I could just clone myself 28 times instead of trying to inspire other people or motivate other people. And it's funny because EO has helped me become a much better leader. I wish I would have had the skills I had running the agency that I've learned on my path of leadership through EO, because I've learned how to inspire instead of incentivize. And I think that's a much better way to lead people.
And
Um,
inspiring, you mean also motivating, right?
Yes, but in a completely different way, because when I lead on the regional council, or when I was chapter president and leading the board of the chapter, I wasn't incentivizing everybody. There was no paycheck. You had to just be
Right.
motivated through being inspired and being
Right.
genuinely wanting to do that hard work. Yeah, but
Right.
it much harder to lead people than to do it by myself. Um, there's not that much for me to do now, though, right? I mean, 4 to 6 keynotes a month. Those are some flights that I book, a couple contracts that I send out, and that's really it. And I'm very hands-on, and I'm also very how can I be of service, right? If I was coming to speak at your conference, I'm going to show up early. I'm going to be at sound check early. I'm going to have my deck on a thumb drive, my own computer in the cloud, all of the fonts for the AV person.
Right.
Uh, I don't need a jar of like just green M&Ms. Like I'm very low maintenance and almost a vagabond type of way.
Hmm.
However, I can be of service. That's my goal, and that it just aligns with my why, and that's why I love doing what I do.
It is glorious to wake up every day and be happy about what you're going to do. It's a wonderful feeling, and people should all experience that.
I think it's a tragedy that most people don't wake up invigorated to
I know.
just jump out of bed and live their best life.
Right.
And I hope that we get to the point where the world is at a different frequency and everybody is
Mhm.
doing their zone of genius. They're living their best life and they feel inspired and not obligated or required.
Right. So let's talk about the Oak Journal. How does somebody get that if they're interested? And tell me a little bit about how they can utilize it without having met you.
Absolutely. And anybody that purchases it or anybody that hears this podcast, I'm very much like available. So you can email me and I'll jump on a one-on-one Zoom and walk you or your family through it. But the way that you would get it is just oakjournal.com. So you can go to Oak Journal or you can go to Amazon, especially if you're in Canada or Mexico. That's a much better place for shipping to have Amazon send it. But oakjournal.com, always use code EO. That's always our best discount when you check out. And yeah, it is available for any and everybody. 90-day structured journal. You set your goals, you set your BHAG, and then there's a daily structure to help you achieve it, a weekly retrospective to make sure you're on track and create the next week's roadmap, and then a different tool every week to serve as your compass to keep you on your path. And it's really blown me away that it was designed for entrepreneurs and high performers, but it resonates with everybody. And I'm always amazed when I get messages from somebody that, hey, I lost 100 pounds this last, 18 months. And I redid my bucket list because now I can do the things I never thought I was gonna be able to do. And it's not what I made it for, but I made it for me, and everybody's got a different path. So it's really cool to see how the same tools can help anybody accomplish what they need to do to be living their best life.
It it sounds rewarding on every level, and I can't imagine how good it must feel to help all different types of people to do just that, find their happiness and live their best life. It sounds kind of cliche, but when you talk about process and that people can actually do this, with methodology, I think that rings true with so many more people. I think sometimes, they hear about meditation and it sounds good, but it's a little bit of a difficult thing to conquer.
Mhm.
And a lot of business people I find work better with that process. And I think this Oak Journal sounds like a great start for so many. So, uh,
There's one
I
part of
know.
it I'll share, and this is not my creation. This is R&D, rip off and duplicate from Warren Rustand, who I'm sure you know, but his 10-10-10 morning routine, 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of reading, 10 minutes of journaling. I learned that from Warren in 2017. And I've been doing it, consistently, call it 350 out of 365 days a year. And it's changed my life. And I think the biggest thing that people struggle with is, when you're meditating and thoughts enter your mind, a lot of individuals feel like, well, I'm not meditating correctly, or I would be in this perfect euphoric, alpha brainwave state. And that's not the case, right? Thoughts are
Right.
constantly entering our mind. That's the point of the meditation. And so one of the things I like to do in the keynote is actually teach people and do a guided meditation to help
Well,
them
that's awesome.
get to that good place and understand, as long as you're meditating, you're doing it right. You can't do it wrong if you're doing the practice, even if your mind is racing the entire time. It's
Right.
because you had that much going on. And if you were tired and you fell asleep, it meant your body needed rest. And if your nose itches, it means you're supposed to scratch it. There's not this uh, Jedi like state that you need to be levitating in to be getting the benefit of. It's just quieting your mind.
Well, that's kind of helpful because I think the times that I've tried, I've always been like, oh my God, I can't stop thinking about this, that, and the other thing. And I'm very, very hard on myself when I've tried to do it. But I do know some people that have changed their ways because they meditate.
Absolutely.
Keith, I can't thank you enough. I was totally fascinated with everything that you said, and I'd love to hear one of your whole speeches. So I think I may be making that recommendation to someone soon. You did tell them how to get the Oak book, and what's the best way if somebody wanted to ask you a question or get in touch with you to contract with you to speak to one of their organizations?
If you can remember Zenman, you can find me. So zenman.com. Amazingly, in the merger, they let me keep the URL, which my attorney, ironically, very funnily said, there's no effing way, and it doesn't hurt to ask. And so we put it in the contract, and they said, why do you want to do
Sure.
that? And I said, hey, I'm writing a book called Becoming Zen Man. And they said, that's a great name for a book. You can keep the URL.
Congratulations. It's
Thank you.
great. And I hope that you continue on this happy path. You are an inspiration.
That was very
It's
kind
great
of you.
talking to you. Thanks so much for joining us.
It was an honor to meet you. Thank you for having me.